Hello, this is the first video about connected cluster, and I'll show you how to use, how to create, and how to set up it. So connected cluster basically just a bunch of fragments under one empty root, and the easiest way to create it is just if you have this one solid object here, you can apply shader component. If you already don't have fragments imported from the other applications, so this is how you can create them inside Unity. You can apply RayFire shader component here. Set some fragments here, let's say 20 to 50 fragment. So here these fragments, and now you can apply RayFire rigid component to this empty root. Set object type to connected cluster and demolition type to runtime if you want to demolish, not just simulate your object. Also, I will set an initialization to start, so when I will start play mode, it will be initialized and it will establish all connections. Also, I will set connectivity type to by mesh. This is the most accurate way to establish all connectivity. It compares all the triangles and finds fragments which are close to each other and share the same area. So basically now your connected cluster is ready to be demolished. So here my rock, which I'm going to drop to this cluster. I can start play mode, and it will take a second to establish all connections. So every time I'll start play mode, it will spend 1 second to establish all this connection, like this. Okay, so now you can see this blue lines. This means that it find out which fragments neighboring with each other. So now it sets here cluster colliders 158 and cluster shards 158. So now this cluster can be demolished. Here you can see it was broken into separate clusters. Yes, I will increase my solidity because it's just too fragile right now. But in order to avoid creating all these colliders and connections every time you start play mode, you can hit here setup cluster. As you can see, it takes about a second to make all the calculations. If I will reset cluster and I will set here connectivity by bounding box, it's almost instant in this case, but connections are not so accurate. I will show you difference in other video tutorials. So the best way is, in case you prepare your fragments in editor and you want to store it as prefab, then you can set here by mesh. Click here setup cluster. It takes some time, and now as you can see, every fragment has its own mesh collider, which is referencing to fragment. Second, turn off. But it will. So now, if I will start play mode, it will not spend this 1 second every time to make all the calculations, because it already established all connections. It already applied all the colliders and know about every shard. And shard, this is the same fragment while it's inside cluster. I call it shard. So, but the problem is that right now you cannot create a prefab using this object, because prefab cannot store mesh inside of it. So if you will create prefab and then go to fragments, you'll see that it says here mesh is none because it cannot store. The same will be true for collider. To avoid this, you need to export all the mesh data into some asset here, and you can do this by getting back to this object which I used to fragment to get all these fragments, and hit here export last fragments. You also can export all fragments using FBX exporter plugin. It's free and you can download in package manager. So I hit export last fragments and I've given it some name, some place to store all the mesh assets. Here it created this asset with all these fragments, so the meshes. And now my fragment here in mesh filter, as you can see, it referencing to this asset. And if I will create mesh collider, as you can see, it still referencing, it's not referencing to this mesh asset, which is the problem. Again, if I will create prefab, I will lose all these colliders meshes. So this is important. If you want to prepare your cluster for prefab, you need to fragment object, then export meshes, and then you need to set up your cluster. Now if I will create select one of the fragments, you can see it mesh colliders also referencing to this asset. So now my cluster finally can be saved as prefab. And let me delete this old prefab here. Okay, so now you can see everything is referencing to this asset. So mesh colliders also referencing to asset. Let me now delete it. And now when I will instantiate this prefab, it will be ready for demolition right away. Actually, let me. So I will put it here. You can see it shows all these connections. Don't need to waste its time for calculating it every time. You just need to do this once. And now it's ready for to be demolished. No extra time required. So here you can see this one, this part was detached. They're not demolishing because of this friction among them, I guess. Also, this part still stays as one cluster. As you can see, it was attached to simple shards only at this area, but this big part stayed connected, and this cluster also stayed connected. So let me move it, and you'll see that start demolishing. So this is how connected cluster work. I can maybe drop this rock in this place just to break it again. So here you can see now I have another cluster here, and this cluster also was demolished. Here you can see this crack. So this is how connected cluster works, and this is when you can use it. And there are plenty of ways to demolish it. You can break it by collision, but in other videos I will show you how to use gun or slide or blade component to break your clusters. Also, there's a new feature, it's called collapse, allows you to break these connections between shards using all this calculated information like area, size of the shared area, shard size, or maybe randomly just removing deleting connections between shards. So you can just move the slider and your fragment will start collapsing. You can do this with every cluster you have. So you will see this or how to do this in other video tutorials. And this is a basic one. I guess that will be enough. Thank you for watching.